Guys, today we're going to be making a memory game on Scratch. So let me just start the game. This is what it's going to look like in the end. So it was yellow, green, green. Right, so you can see the dancer moving, there's some sounds, and there's the drums in the front, and you can see the score that when you start off the game, you start with 3. So let's do yellow, green, green. And then it does a dancing thing also, if you get it right. And now the score is 4, because it's going to be 4. So green, red, red, red. Okay, so now our score is 5. And this time I'll get it wrong on purpose so you can see what happens. So suppose I do yellow. So it says game over. And it says what's your name? So I'll just and it says your name. And yeah, that's it. So let's get started. First go to Scratch, create a new project. Okay, so you can delete the cat sprite and add the backdrop and type in Spotlight, this one. And also I'm going to add the ballerina in right now. Right there, ballerina. Okay, and you can already see that she already has a bunch of 4 costumes. So it's going to make it much easier than rather than having to duplicate and like mess around with it. Okay, so I'm just going to move the ballerina on the stage. Okay, so now you can change the costumes to different colors. So I'm gonna name, or I'm gonna change this color to the red one. So you go to the fill option, the fill tool, and then you change this to red, and then you can just click on her dress and it becomes red. I'm gonna do the same for the rest of them. So blue for the second one. And keep in mind the order you're doing the colors because it's gonna be relevant later on when we're actually doing the memory part of it. So and this one is yellow. And by order, I mean like the order of the colors. So red is first, blue is second, green is third, yellow is fourth. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, now what we're going to do is we're going to, we can do a couple things. I'm going to first add the drums that we're going to later be using. Oh yes, and I just realized I forgot something. So let me just duplicate the drums. We need 4 drums. Okay, just move them on top of the runway. Here, that. Like that. And now you can even name the drums right here under the canvas. Call this one red drum, blue drum, and then once again, you're gonna have to go to costumes to change it. Go to fill, or since yellow is all I've selected, I'll just do yellow right now. Um, and for drum, you're gonna have to tap each one individually, each like panel. Okay, so yellow is supposed to be the 4th one, so I'm just gonna move it over. Okay, and it's gonna be the green drum. And then the blue drum. You can get started with the code. So first go to the ballerina, go to events, and we want the game to start when we press the green flag. So get this when green flag click block. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make a list. So basically just go to variables, click on this make a list button, and call it sequence. And you can really call it whatever you want, but all a list is it's basically a set of variables, and you can just see it right here. So basically, a variable is just like a name, and you can store any value inside that name. So this is a list, so it's going to be, the name is this is sequence, and we can store multiple values in this inside of this name. And we'll see what I mean in a minute. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to be adding numbers to this sequence, and those numbers are going to represent colors later on. But first, you can just get this add thing to sequence block and change this thing to go to operators and get this pick random number, because we want the colors to be random, right? So we're gonna pick random 1 to 4, and this 1 to 4 is gonna represent the costumes that we were talking about earlier. So 1 will represent red, 2 blue, 3 green, 4 yellow, and we want to do this 3 times for the first round at least. So for now, we're just gonna make this inside this repeat loop, and we're gonna set it to 3. And also, whenever we start a new game, whenever we click the green flag again, we want to delete all the previous numbers in the sequence. So you can just go back to variables and delete all of sequence, and put this before the repeat because we want it to delete the previous number every single time. And lastly, let's add this wait 1 second after the pick random, so that it takes a little bit of time for it to switch costumes so you can actually see what's going on. Okay, now we can actually get into the looks of it. And so you go to looks, and then we can switch costume to Ballerina D, but we want to change this to the number of the sequence. So you go back to variables, and then you get this. This is a little bit complicated, but you just get this item 1 of sequence. But we don't want to always do the first number, right? Because like say the 3 numbers are 1, 2, 3. It's gonna stay red the entire time because it's gonna keep on changing to the first number, which is 1. So we want to change to the number that we are currently on, which means we want to change to the length of the sequence. Because when there's only not one number, we want to change to the first number. When there's 2 numbers, we want to change to the second number. When there's 3, third, and then so on. Okay, so now let's just try it out and see if the costumes are working. And yeah, as you can see, it was 1, so it turned red, 3 turned green, 4 turned yellow. And once again, these numbers, the reason it's changing to certain colors for each number is the first number is red, second is blue, and you can just see on the top left of these costumes, that's what's corresponding with the colors. So if you want to change the colors or change the numbers around, then you can just like make this one yellow and make this one red, and then yellow will be 1, red will be 4. So that's how that works. Alright, now we're going to be adding the sounds to the ballerina. So first what we want to do is we want to add this extension. It's on the bottom left. It's like 2 blocks with a plus sign. Just click on that, and there's a music extension, and this is just going to add another category with a series of blocks that you can use that you can't find in the rest of the categories. So what we're going to use for our scenario is this play drum block, and we're going to move it. You can put it right underneath or right above this one, but it needs to be after the add block and before the wait block. So we're going to change this play drum, and instead of just doing the same sound every single time, we're going to do a different sound depending on the color we're doing. So we're going to do play drum, and we're going to go back to variables, and exactly like the last one, we're just going to do item 1 of sequence and length of sequence in 1. So it's going to basically do play drum, and then it's going to play the and the reason we're using numbers is because all of these instruments are labeled with numbers, and you can see 1 is snare drum, 2 is bass drum, 3 side stick, 4 is crash cymbal. So if we get red, then we're going to play snare drum. If we get blue, then bass, green side stick, and yellow crash cymbal. And that's all this is saying. So if let's just do it again. So crash cymbal, bass drum, and it was yellow, blue, blue. So that's how that works. Alright, so I just remembered, the thing that I was forgetting was to name your project, so I'm just going to name it Memory. You can name it Memory Game or really whatever you want. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to have to add broadcast messages to each of these, and all that's going to do is basically it just means that, oh wait, I just realized this is the wrong order. So basically, it's just going to be so that whenever we click on one of these sprites, um, it's going to send a signal, and then we're going to check whenever we receive that signal if that was indeed the first number of the sequence. Okay, so first we go to events, and we want to check when the sprite is clicked. We want to broadcast, not message 1, but let's add a new message and call it red. So we're going to broadcast that the red drum has been clicked. Now we're going to do the same thing for the blue drum. I'm going to put it over here, and put the green drum also, and the yellow drum also. But make sure that you change the name of the message to the corresponding color. So I'm going to call this blue. I'm going to move this over, call this one green, and move this over, call this one yellow. Okay, so now when we go back to Ballerina, we'll do when I receive red, we want to first of all check if the first number of the sequence actually corresponds with the color that was clicked in the broadcast. And we can do this by going to control and getting the if then block, not the if else block, but the if then block, so that if we get it wrong, then we want something else to happen. Okay, so we're gonna check if get this equal operator. So since it's red, we want to check if it's equal to 1, and we want to check if the first number of the sequence is equal to 1, which means if item 1 of sequence if item 1 of sequence is equal to 1, then we want to do some code. Okay, so what we're gonna do, firstly, we want to delete the first number of the sequence, and the reason we can just use item 1 of sequence here is because we're always going to, if it's correct, we're going to delete the first one. So that's why we can always just use item 1, even for blue, even for green, yellow. But if we get it wrong, then we can go to looks, and we want it to say game over, or anything similar to that, for 2 seconds. So it doesn't really matter how long. And then we can go to control, and there's this block right here, stop all, and make sure that you put it in the else loop, or else it's going to stop all, even if you get the question right. Okay, so next let's add some music for if we get it right. So I'm going to go to the music section and get this play drum block. And I'm going to, you can put it either before or after this, doesn't matter. You can play drum, snare drum, because that's number 1. But now what we're going to do is, we're going to be doing the same thing for blue, green, and yellow, right? Like if I just duplicated this, put this right here, just change it to blue. But the difference is going to be that we want to check if the first number is equal to 2, because that's blue. And then we want to delete the first number, and we want to check if it's bass drum. But we're going to have to do the same thing for all of them. And there's only 2 differences in this entire, in these pair of blocks. And that's all, and all that is that this is changed to 2, and this is changed to bass drum. So there's a better way of doing this, and that's just creating your own block. And so you go to my blocks, make a block. You can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it receive color. So once you make a block, this define receive color should show up in your coding area, and you can just define it however you want. So I'm just going to put all this code that we put over here under here. But now, if I put receive color under each of these, like if I just deleted all of this, just put receive color, the problem with that is going to be that it's going to check, if we get blue, it's going to check if it's equal to 1, which is not what we want to do. We want to check if it's equal to 2, right? So we want to check based on whatever color we got. So what we have to do this is we have to add another variable. So you have to go to variables, or this is one of the ways to do it. There's other ways too, I suppose, but you can make a variable and make it for all sprites, and just call it current, or you can call it color clicked. So I made a variable, and whenever I click on the red drum, underneath this broadcast red block, I'll get the set color click block and change it to 1. And I'll do the same thing for all the rest of them. So for the blue one, this will be 2. Green is going to be set color click to 3, and yellow is going to set color click to 4. Now, when we go back to Ballerina, if the item is, if the first number is equal to the color clicked number, so we can just put color clicked right here, then you can delete the first one. And also, instead of making this play drum number 1, we can just set it to color clicked. Alright, now all we have to do is just do the same thing for the rest of the colors. So I'm going to duplicate all this, change this one to green, change this one to yellow. Okay, so now if we play it, blue, red, yellow, okay, blue, red, you can hear there's a different sound for each one, and yellow. So everything seems to be working, and the sequence gets deleted every time you click it correctly. Color clicked is set to 4 right now because the last color that I just clicked was yellow. Okay, so now that we have the main part done, we just need to add what happens if we win. So at the end of this, let me just move this flag block up a little bit. Oops, I don't know what this happens. Flag block up a little bit. And then at the end of this repeat loop, we can add, go to control. You can add this wait until block right here. And we're going to wait until the length of the sequence is 0, right? Because that means we finished all the entire sequence. So you go to operators, get the equals one, change it to 0. We want to see if the length of the sequence is equal to 0, and that's in variables. Length of sequence is equal to 0. And then once it is equal to 0, then it's going to move on to the next block, and that block is going to broadcast a new message called 1. And remember, with these messages and variables, you can really call them whatever you want, right? All that matters is that you're using the same name, the same word, for where you're accessing it. Like, for example, if I just made this when I receive, if I did, instead of making this a broadcast red, I could have broadcast red drum or something like that. But you have to make sure that you change this to when I receive red drum. You can't just keep this red, so that the computer knows what you're talking about. Okay, so now that we've broadcasted 1, what are we going to do with this? Well, we need to add some code to tell the game what to do when it receives 1. So I'm going to go to backdrop here, because this is kind of like an overall set of code that's going to be happening in the entire canvas. So I'm going to get, when I receive 1, this 1 message, then we wanted to do certain things. So first we want to add a drum machine sound. I'm just going to go to sounds, add drum machine, something like that. You can click on that, and then you can go to sound, and instead of using the block play sound drum machine until done, use the block start sound drum machine, because what that means is that it will start the music, but then it will continue doing its code even while the music is running. But with this block, it will stay on the play sound drum machine until done block while it's running, and then it'll go to the next part, which is not what we want. We want the music to be running while the lights are flashing. So we added that, and now we want to change the background effect. So I'm gonna go to looks, change color effect by 25, but we want to change it multiple times. So I'm gonna go to control, repeat, make this like 50. Now the only problem with this is it's gonna go a little bit too fast because there's no wait or anything over here. It's just gonna keep on repeating really quickly. So I'm going to go to, we're already in control, so I'm just going to get this wait block and put in the repeat loop and make it 0.1 seconds. Okay. And now, I'm going to do, so 2, 3, 2, it does that. Okay, and it's done. And now you can see there's just one problem, that the lights are still changed. So you can go back to looks and get this clear graphic effects block. You just click on that, you can and you can see it clears all the graphic effects. Alright, so now we're going to be adding the score part, the score aspect of this game. So let's go to Ballerina, and let's add a new variable. So go to variables, make a variable, just call it score. You can set it for all sprites. I think for the sprite only would also work. Just going to set that, and it should also appear in the canvas. And at the beginning of each game, we want to set the score to 3, because that's how many there are. So, or you can just set it to 0. It doesn't really matter, but I'll just set it to 3. And also, I'm gonna set it. I want it to increase by 1 every time we win. So right here, change score by 1 every time we broadcast 1. And now, lastly, let's just add a forever loop that contains all of this, and make sure you don't put the set score in the forever loop, or else it's gonna continuously make the score 3 over and over again, so you'll never actually be able to increase. Like it will change to 4 for a split second, and then it'll change back to 3. So make sure that the set score is before the forever loop, and also make sure that you have the delete all sequence in the forever loop, because we don't want it to continuously keep on like adding up. And instead of using this repeat 3, change that to score, so that it the amount it runs changes every time. So I'm just gonna do this again. Bam. Oops. Yeah. So I clicked it during the. Let me just restart. Okay. So we have a problem, and the problem is that it continues the sequence while it's running, and the reason for that is because when we say broadcast 1, um, it does do the winning code, but then it just moves straight on to restarting the entire round. So we need to, instead of using this broadcast 1 block, let's go back to events and use this broadcast 1 and wait block. So that will make it wait until this is finished running. Try one more time. Red, yellow, yellow. Red, yellow, yellow. Okay. And now it waits for everything to stop. And then it goes blue, yellow, yellow. And we got a 4th one, finally, because we set it to score. So now it's doing 4 blocks. Or, sorry, 4 rounds. And now it should do 5 rounds, hopefully. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's just get this wrong on purpose. Let's just do red. And it should say game over. There we go. And everything stops. Perfect. Okay, so now let's add one more thing. And let's add a high score aspect to it. So I'm going to go to variables, make a variable. Just call it high score. Okay. And let's go to this function right here that we were talking about earlier. That we defined earlier, I mean. This receive color function. So it checks whenever we receive one of these colors, then it checks if the number is correct, and if it is, then it deletes the number and it plays the music. But if it's not correct, then it says game over, and that's all we do though. So let's add a little bit more. So first of all, let's check if it was a high score, if this score that we just got was a high score. So we can go to control and get this if block, and make sure you put it after game over, and make sure that the stop all is after the if block, because you want to be saying game over no matter what, and you want to be stopping everything no matter what. But don't make sure that you don't have the stop all before the if block. In fact, it shouldn't even let you do that, because that will just make the if block not run, which is not what we want. Okay, so now we want to check if, let's go to operators, if our score in this game, our score was greater than our high score. Oh, high score. Okay, so if it was greater than our high score, then we want to do a couple things. First, we want to set our high score to our score, and then we want to ask a question. We want to ask, what's your name? Or let me just write before this, high score, and then what's your name? And let's add another variable. Let's call it name. Call it name of player or something like that. And then we'll wait, and then we can set name to the answer. So it will do all this, and then after all of this is done, it will stop. And if the high score is not, if the score is not greater than the high score, then it should just skip all of this and go straight to stop. So let's try again. Okay, so our our score right now is gonna be 4 after this, and our high score is 0. So it should, like, if I lose on purpose, it says game over, and then it asks your name. Okay, so we give our name. Now our name is set to name, and our high score is set to our current score. So this is good, and when we restart, our score restarts too. Perfect. Okay, now our game is completely functional, but we can just add some finishing touches. So firstly, what I want to do is I want to clean up the code a little bit, because although it's working just fine, aesthetically I don't think it looks that good. So I'm going to add another block. I'm going to call it the game over block. So we can just place this block wherever we want to, when we want the game to be over. So first, let's define game over. I'm just going to move this block down here, and I'm going to all of this inside the game over block, so we don't have to see it anymore, and then we can just put game over here. It makes it look much better. And also, it's much easier to just add code to our game over if we want to. So first, I want to let's add the cough noise when you lose. So go to sounds, choose a sound, cough, and I'm going to go to sound, and then start sound, not play sound until done, because then it won't run the rest of the code. So start sound cough 1, because we lost. And then if our score is higher than our high score, then we want to play the trumpet sound, because that's a good thing. So I'm gonna go here, trumpet, this one, trumpet 1, and I'm gonna get play sound trumpet 1 until, or sorry, not until done, start sound trumpet 1. And the reason I can just do this all over here is because, remember, whenever we use this game over block right here, all it's doing is it's just calling, basically that means it's accessing this entire piece of code right here. It's running all this code in this one block. Basically, that's what that means. And this piece of code is called a function. Function is basically a set of code that you can call anywhere else in the code without having to rewrite the entire thing. And so now we can just test out our game. And before you do that, make sure that you get rid of this sequence. Don't delete it, but just make sure that's hidden. And color click, we're not going to need either. I think name, score, and high score we can keep. You can drag these and just move them up and down, just like the rest of the spikes. Do the same thing with the variables. And I'm going to full screen it. And run this. Yellow, green, red. Our score is 3, our high score is 4. Yellow, green, yellow, 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 green, yellow, yellow. Okay, now our score should be 5. So green, yellow, blue, red, green. Green, yellow, blue, red, green. Okay. Our score should be 6. Green, blue, red, blue, green, yellow. Okay, so green, blue, red, blue, oops, blue, green. Instead of being yellow, I'm just gonna purposely do blue and get it wrong, and let's see if the game over function works. Okay, Cough says game over. And since we got our score was higher than 4, which is our high score, first of all, it changed our high score to 6, which is our current score. And then it asks, what's your name? So I'll just type in my name. And it changes your name to that. And there we go, that's it. That's our memory game.